Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of the Synergy Speaks webinar series featuring myself, Josh Pelletier, and Stephanie Alperlisi. Thank you guys for listening today. We are joined with a guest today, Glenn Usher from Lincoln Financial. Glenn is our MoneyGuard wholesaler and will be doing his presentation on Beyond Self-Funding for Long-Term Care and share with us Lincoln's new asset identifier piece, as well as an additional report that can be paired with MoneyGuard illustration to really bring home the solution for the long-term care need. Glenn, thanks for joining us today. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Josh, thanks so much, and thanks everybody for listening in. I think today's session is really geared toward a report that we have available with MoneyGuard that frankly isn't utilized all that often, but I think provides a lot of value to a client once they understand exactly what it is that they're looking to protect against. So the sales concept that we're going to review is called Beyond Self-Funding, and I think the name might be a little bit confusing. So ultimately what we're looking to do, and both of the pieces that I'm reviewing are really positioning tools, and I use the word positioning rather than sales tools because that's exactly what we're looking to do with both of these, is just position one type of strategy compared to another type of strategy. I think we have a challenge in this space of folks just really not understanding kind of what long-term care is or what it does, and frankly, the impact that a long-term care event could have to their own portfolio. And they don't realize that they do have a long-term care plan in place. They just haven't thought it through, so they don't know that their long-term care plan is their retirement planning portfolio. So one tool to help with that is this asset identifier piece that you see on your screen here. The whole concept here is to engage the client in the LTC planning conversation by being completely product agnostic. So we're not looking to show the client a solution to a problem that they don't yet know that they have. We're looking to introduce the concept and then have the client pencil out exactly what their long-term care plan would be based on the sort of do nothing strategy, which is what everybody's doing. They just don't know it because they haven't had that change of health that's going to force them down one path or the other. So the top half of the asset identifier is about quantifying the overall risk to the client and the client's family by penciling out exactly what the home health care costs are in their local area or in the area that they plan on retiring. Same with the assisted living and the nursing facility. We have a resource at Lincoln. It's called whatcarecosts.com. Once you visit that website, you can very quickly drill down to any particular state, any particular area, and find out exactly what the cost of care is. So the ability to fill out these top three sections here. And that's really where the conversation starts, is if you were to have a long-term care or an extended care event and all of a sudden had to come up with the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month that it is for an assisted living or for a home health aide, or for the $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 per month that it might be for a nursing home, if you were to have to come up with those funds, how would you pay for it? And kind of pausing there, most clients are going to think, oh, we have X amount of dollars in our coming from Social Security, or we have X amount of dollars from an annuity income stream. You will get a lot of different answers, but ultimately what you're trying to outline is that at that point in time, the client's going to be in a cash flow crisis. In other words, they have income that they're going to have to divert to pay for these long-term care services. And if they're not diverting income, they're going to have to sell off assets to be able to afford the care that they're receiving. So what we're looking to do with the asset identifier piece is say, you already have a plan for long-term care. You just don't know it because you haven't had the event. So let's hypothetically explore exactly the impact that this would have to your retirement planning portfolio. That way, that gives us a basis to say, if we're going to explore alternate strategies, at least we have something to compare it to. So let's compare your self-funded or self-insured strategy, which is ultimately keep doing what you're doing, or introducing other concepts. Maybe that's a MoneyGuard policy, or maybe it's something else, but it's a different strategy. But having the asset identifier piece helps us as a basis for comparison. So what you would do after filling out this top half and quantifying the risk is do exactly that. You're going to pencil out what this client's long-term care plan actually looks like. So if you were to say, all of a sudden overnight you had a catastrophic stroke and now you require substantial assistance in a nursing home, that's going to cost you $12,000 to $14,000 a month. How are you going to pay for that for the first year? right? How are you going to pay for that for years 2, 3, 4, and however long it stretches? And what you're quickly going to find are folks that may think that they are adequately prepared from a financial standpoint either aren't, or they are prepared, but they would much rather rely on a strategy that gives them some of the efficiencies that we're going to introduce with Lincoln's MoneyGuard. So what you would do on the top half is quantify the risk by plugging in the at-home cost, the assisted living and nursing facility. The bottom half is specific to that individual client to say, oh, we would tap into our checking or our savings account. Then we might move on to our portfolio, probably looking into the money markets, the CDs, the bonds, some of the more conservative, lower yielding emergency type assets. Then you tap into what qualified assets and non-qualified assets, and that's when you really get into the idea of this is something that could completely erode all of the retirement planning that you've done, and do so on terms that are much less than advantageous as it relates to taxes and leverage and that sort of thing. So again, stage one is quantifying the risk. Stage two is penciling out what that client's long-term care plan looks like. Then we can say, okay, here's strategy A. Now let's look at strategy B or strategy C to see if we can add efficiencies into your existing plan. The client's existing plan will look something like this. So this is the Beyond Self-Funding report. And again, this report can get tacked onto any MoneyGuard illustration. It's going to automatically take the information contained on the specific illustration tailored to that client and populate this report out of it. And what I like about this report is it actually adds some really nice visuals. So when you're introducing the concept and the strategy, it makes much more sense than you're just looking at dollars and cents on a ledger. So the idea is the MoneyGuard strategy is providing protection that's beyond their self-funded plan. We just saw what their self-funded plan looked like as we filled out the asset identifier, right? Oh, we're going to tap into our checking, our savings. Maybe we have to sell the vacation house. Maybe we're tapping into our IRA. So a lot of different nuance to every individual clients, but ultimately you're showing them what their self-funded plan potentially looks like. Then we introduce the concept of MoneyGuard and how that could potentially fit in. We're going beyond their self-funded plan. So there's some good information on here, just kind of teeing up the conversation. But as you see here, the investment assets, the other assets, when you're talking about the asset identifier, you're really talking about which one of these assets, Mr. or Mrs. Client, are you going to tap into first when you have a long-term care event? And then which ones are you going to tap into once that asset's liquidated, right? So you use the cash you have, then you're tapping into your CDs, your bonds. Once those are spent down, then you might be tapping into some non-qualified assets, then potentially qualified assets, and then potentially, reverse mortgaging the house. So walking them through the scenario that most folks typically end up going through without any type of planning. So once we have that done with the asset identifier, now we can introduce the MoneyGuard concept and say, well, hey, why would you spend dollar for dollar, potentially more than dollar for dollar once taxation is figured in, to fund your long-term care event when you can take a fraction of that, put it aside into this guaranteed MoneyGuard strategy, and provide multiple different buckets depending on the type of care that's needed. But it also adds in this particular chart. So before I jump into that, the hypothetical that we're looking at is just a 50-year-old male. I have him pegged as a 30% tax bracket, knowing that every client's going to have a completely different tax situation. They might be dealing with state and municipal taxes, local taxes, things like that. So I just picked a 30% rate just to show and demonstrate exactly kind of the leverage and efficiencies that we're getting with MoneyGuard. In this case, we're showing $10,000 a year, funding it over 10 years. And we're going to compare the MoneyGuard strategy versus these alternate strategies. So if this client, instead of putting $10,000 a year for 10 years into the MoneyGuard plan, what if they were to find investments on a guaranteed basis that could provide them a 7% rate of return, which I think is consistent with 20, 30-year returns on the S&P, and then a 1% rate of return, which is probably akin to what they're likely getting in their bonds, their CDs, money markets, things like that in today's low interest rate environment. So we are going to look at two alternate investments and then compare that with Lincoln's MoneyGuard. So remember, we looked at their self-funded plan with the asset identifier. Now we're saying, what if we were to take $10,000 a year and fund it into an investment earning 7% or an investment earning 1%? And how does that strategy compare to the MoneyGuard strategy that we have on the table? So here's really where the story starts to make sense, right? We have all of the numbers and all that I'm going to review are all reflected in this chart that's up at the top. So to the left-hand side, this is looking at the benefits at age 85 for this particular client, right? They put the $100,000 in over 10 years. By the time they reach the age of 85, they have over $1.2 million of LTC leverage. Look at that same asset. So if we were to take the $100,000 over 10 years and put it into an asset that could guarantee us a return of 7%, you're not going to find any investments out there that are going to guarantee 7%. But even so, you can see the significant reduction in the amount of leverage because we have to pay taxes on many of those funds, right? So if they're out there earning 7%, more than likely we're going to be paying taxes on it. Now, whether that's ordinary income or capital gains, that adds a little bit of additional nuance. But what we don't have to talk about with Lincoln's MoneyGuard is the fact that there is no taxation, right? All the benefits paid from the MoneyGuard plan, whether death benefit or LTC, are going to be paid tax-free. So when you're talking about some of those risks that clients face in retirement, tax planning is certainly one of them. Market risk is obviously another one. Interest rate risk is another one. What we're doing with MoneyGuard is mitigating all of those risks at once because the MoneyGuard plan is a fully guaranteed plan. So jockeying down here to the bottom, we see on the left-hand side the MoneyGuard policy. The right-hand side are those two alternate investments. So if we were to have an investment available that could earn a 7% guaranteed, or we could earn a 1% guaranteed, typically your investment's going to fall somewhere in that ballpark. So we have the $10,000 going in, the MoneyGuard LTC pool, right, almost 1.3 million by the time this client reaches the age of 85. The IRR, the internal rate of return on that, is 7.8%. Again, that's tax-free, which is a huge component here and a big point to bring up. The death benefit paid if they never need care is $100,000. Now we compare that with the after-tax value of the 7% investment and the 1% investment. The 7% is going to give him a little over $400,000 if he's able to earn 7%. Again, you're not going to find that guaranteed out there, but for the sake of illustrative purposes, let's just assume that they can. If they were able to earn 1% after tax, that would be about $123,000. So what's the real opportunity cost here? It's the difference between what the guaranteed return is of MoneyGuard with the death benefit being the $100,000, ultimately saying you stayed healthy, you never needed care, we're going to give you your money back at the end of the day, versus if they were to invest and earn, somewhere in the ballpark of a 1% return. So I think that IRR there is the biggest story here. So what that's saying is if this client was able to find a guaranteed investment in the marketplace that could give them a return of 7.8%, that's what we would need to compare with the MoneyGuard policy. And keep in mind, that's a tax-free IRR with MoneyGuard. So really, you'd have to gross that up and earn somewhere in the ballpark of, probably 11, 12% to be able to generate that same protection pool that we have for MoneyGuard. So that's the beyond self-funding concept. There's a few additional pages here which are going to show the IRRs and the other values and of that alternate investment. But I think the story, the take-home message here is, first we fill out the asset identifier and figure out exactly what that client's long-term care plan looks like today. So likely they haven't done any type of planning. What we want to do is say, not do you want to purchase a solution for long-term care. What we want to say is, let's identify what your strategy is currently for a long-term care event. We'll weigh the pros, the cons of that. Then we'll identify if there's any opportunities for efficiencies as it relates to leverage and taxation, like we have with the MoneyGuard strategy. And then ultimately let the client decide between, do I want to continue doing what I'm doing with plan A, or should I explore this other opportunity with plan B? And I think when it's framed in that fashion, we really shouldn't be selling these. We should be positioning these. We're positioning the MoneyGuard strategy compared to what they're already doing, what they're currently doing. They just haven't gone through the exercise of actually requiring a long-term care event. So they haven't gone through this exercise. So what we're doing is penciling that out, giving them what their strategy is in sort of step one. Then we're comparing that to the MoneyGuard strategy using the Beyond Self-Funding report to say, hey, you are self-funding. You've done a great job planning for your retirement, but here's another strategy that can actually increase the leverage on those dollars that you've already accumulated, and then also help protect those dollars if and when you have a long-term care event. So these two pieces, I think, work really well in conjunction with one another. It's a great way to bring the conversation up and lead with a, more product agnostic, more kind of, not necessarily solutions based, but really helping the client understand what the true risk and what their true need is, and then just giving you a basis of comparison to compare any other strategies out there, like Lincoln's MoneyGuard with the Beyond Self Funding. So with that, Josh, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Awesome. Well, Glenn, thanks so much. This is great stuff, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your day today to join us all. Again, it was really great stuff. You really showed us the ultimate conversation starter for long-term care, and really paired a nice presentation that really brings home the value of a MoneyGuard policy. So, with that, we're definitely going to be sending out the identifier and a sample presentation of the Beyond Self-Funding to everybody that was a part of this call. If anybody has any questions or wants to know more, please reach out to myself or Stephanie. We can be reached at 212-929-4009 or by emailing sales@sbkg.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.